Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Say hey, this is the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston, and I am here with
Howard Jacobson of Sick to Fit and Plant Yourself.
Sometimes people ask me when they're going to get to talk to the evil Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Well, maybe the evil Dr. Glenn Livingston always introduces himself as the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston.
That's what the evil Dr. Glenn Livingston would do, wouldn't he?
Yeah, sure would.
But this is the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston.
I can hear the kindness in your voice.
I don't entirely know why I started saying that, but it became a call sign, so I just kept at it. I like it. I wanted to talk today about a quote, and I wanted to tell you what it meant to me, and I was curious what it meant to you and how people can use it to eat healthy and be well in the world. Sound okay?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. The man's name is Jiddu Krishnamurti, and he writes, "It's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. It's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." What this means to me is that when I look around at what our culture is doing with food, I think that most people in our culture have a tacit agreement to slowly kill themselves while joking about it, denying it, and looking the other way, and supporting each other to do that. I think they support each other in social circles, and then they focus on feeling deprived if they forego a lot of the indulgences that they're supporting each other to slowly kill themselves with hardly any thought about what they're really depriving themselves of by continuing. So the takeaway for me on that is that I don't strive to be average. I don't strive to define my health by the people that I see around me. I strive to be superior with health because I can, because I'm worth it, and because I think that it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. What do you think?
I love that, and I love it on a lot of different levels. What you just said reminds me of this old Hasidic Jewish story about this king who discovers that his entire kingdom, all the grain, has like this poison, ergot or something, that they did with the witch trials that made people go crazy. If they wanted to survive, they were all going to have to eat this and go crazy. He had enough for himself. But the question is, did he want to be the sane ruler of a sick society, of an insane society? What he ended up doing is just like he couldn't rule them if he was sane and they weren't, but he appointed like somebody to kind of remind everyone that they were insane.
That's interesting. And so what's the implication?
The implication is that we have to step out of the agreements that we have made without even knowing about it. Whatever you grow up in, you think is normal. Right? Like your childhood home seemed normal to you. My childhood home seemed normal to me. Our culture seems normal to us until we then look. Like for me, one of the hugest shocks was discovering blue zones, right? These 5 areas of the world where people are so much healthier and they live so much longer and so much more vibrant, active, engaged lives. And then I'm like, oh, is it possible that we could be doing something better when it all seems so normal to us? The first question is, how do you know you're living in a profoundly sick society unless you actively take measures to compare it to others or to compare it to some ideal?
And so by seeing that there were these blue zones, you said, well, we could be doing better.
Yeah, there's a problem in epidemiology called the sick population problem. Let's say you have a population where everybody smokes cigarettes, and they've all smoked cigarettes since they were little kids. It's like drinking coffee or something. Like as soon as you were old enough to play with matches, everyone smoked. There would be a certain amount of lung disease in that society, far above and beyond what there would be in a society that didn't act like that. And yet, if you were an epidemiologist looking at that society, you would never connect smoking with lung disease because it's not a variable.
If everybody smokes, there's nobody to compare it against.
Right.
Yeah.
Like for me, looking at the blue zones, it was like, oh, there's other societies that get very different results. Maybe these things, like medicine, you go to a doctor, they're not really going to talk front and center about your diet, about exercise, lifestyle, stress management. Even to this day, they mostly focus on, well, it runs in your family, or, well, you have it, we don't know why it happens, bad luck, here's some medicines. And so for you and me to say, hey, you can change your destiny. Like, I'll ask you this because you're much more focused, I think, on weight loss than I try to be. What do people come to you saying about why they can't lose weight that's backed up by science?
It's rare. It's rare that they have reasons that they can't lose weight, which are backed up by science. Some people, like there's some women in their 50s and 60s that seem to have metabolic problem. And I
don't mean that it's backed up by science. I mean, they think it's backed up by science. I can't lose weight. Like 95% of people gain it back. The people I'm Biggest Loser, their metabolism changed, or, my hormones are off.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Okay. So a lot of people come to me with a story that they think is evidence-based about the reasons they can't lose weight because weight loss is just not possible. We just have to accept that obesity is a natural human condition, and there's really nothing you can do about it.
Because of the prevalence and the incidence in the population, and they're surrounded by it. Yeah, I know what you mean now. When I was in marketing, there was this concept of marketing incest, where all the vendors in the market would copy all the other vendors in the market. And there was some really strong market need that was going unmet. And I would teach my entrepreneurs to look for that need and be the one vendor in the market that stood up and said, look, the emperor has no clothes. Why isn't anybody taking care of you like this? But the vendors tend to start to believe that this is just the way that it's done, and the population starts to believe, the market starts to believe that this is all that's available. And it's a self-perpetuating model until somebody stands up and says, it's no measure of health be adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
Right. Like when you lost your 60, 65 pounds or whatever, when I got healthy, and particularly when people like my business partner, Josh Lajani, loses 230 pounds, people then say, oh, well, you're different. I couldn't do what you did. By definition, anyone who breaks with this tacit collusion with the status quo is viewed with suspicion or called, you're different. Doesn't matter how many times people do it, they're all different.
Works for you, it couldn't possibly work for me. And we're at a point now where if you look at the numbers, the body weight that we need to be, or the percentage of fat that we need to have in order to be optimally healthy, is a percentage which makes us look skinny by comparison to the average weight people have accepted. And so you actually have to fight societal norms to be at your ideal weight.
Right.
Yeah.
Not sure if you want to go there, but the other way I think about that quote is, as a psychologist, there's a lot of schools of therapy that specifically their goal is to help people become adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
What do you mean?
Like, okay, someone comes to you, they're depressed, and we're like, okay, well, we'll give you some cognitive tools or meds so that you can go and not be depressed, when in fact, maybe this culture is
very depressing. It's a very depressing culture, right? Right.
It's not teaching people to get along. You teach people outrage at the system, which I think is probably the most freeing part of the whole thing for me.
I do. I didn't do that on purpose, but it was the only way that I managed to succeed with myself, was to say, I'm opting out. I'm opting out of all the sugar, salt, and fat. I'm opting out of all the starch and hyperpalatable concentrations of excitotoxins. And I'm opting out of eating flavored cardboard in the food system. And I guess I do try to help people turn their shame into anger. I do help them understand that I don't think that overeaters have a disease or that they're powerless. I think that we have healthy appetites that have been corrupted by industry. I didn't expect we were going to talk about that, but that really does fit with this quote, doesn't it?
I think so. I think it's one of the most empowering things you can tell people. People can then become activists. Like you go to Weight Watchers, you're just sort of on this program doing their rules and you're still the same person. You're like, you know what? Let's change the substrate under which we are all fighting this, because you know what? I'm not going to get everyone in my family, everyone in my town to do it. Right? I can see how much we're paying globally for the costs of all this chronic disease and obesity. I can see, especially now with COVID-19, the costs that people are paying who are obese, who have a much higher morbidity and mortality rate. I have this thing that I can do something about. I have energy and I have the will to call out the fact that the food emperor has no clothes, and that can help other people.
Maybe I'm making a difference in a way that I didn't know I was making a difference. I like that.
Hell yeah. I mean, yeah, I know you do marketing, but I would encourage you to talk to people who have been successful for a couple of years. How far have the ripples gone?
You mean to find out who they've influenced and what they've done, and maybe some people have become activists because they're no longer buried under a pile of shame in bags and boxes and containers?
Yeah. Like there's an earthquake and you manage to extricate yourself from the rubble with somebody's help. Like somebody finds you and gives you their hand and pulls you out. And then you can either go on with your life or you can look for more people to pull out.
Yeah. And we like to try to help people do that too. So very good. Anything else you want to say about this?
No, I'm happy to be reminded of the quote because it means a lot to me.
It's no measure of health to be well adjusted to our profoundly sick society.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.